Greetings and God's peace be with you. My name is Kristofer Lindh-Payne and I'm one of the co-rectors at St. Francis Episcopal Parish and Community Center. Perhaps you heard in Sarah's sermon over the weekend that we had a great weekend here in the Episcopal Diocese of Maryland as we celebrated our 238th, I believe, 238th diocesan convention. That is a lot of conventions over a lot of time. I encourage you to take a look at the link that I've included here, and you can learn more about some of what was going on at that convention. But we covered a wide range of topics, had just great time of fellowship and connectivity in the body of Christ. We looked at several resolutions, focused on reparations and what it means as the people of God in this particular community of love to give in ways that seek to repair damage done from the institution of slavery and the continuance of racism and its impact on the world that we live in today. We had lots of really good discussion and some really powerful movements that took place around that. And I've just been thinking about a lot of that today. In the feast, in the cycle of Lesser Feasts and Fasts, we celebrate Samuel Seabury, who was the first bishop in the Episcopal Church. And I looked back through some of the historic records. And so he was consecrated the same year that I believe our first diocesan convention was. That was in 1784. And he was consecrated as bishop this day. And so it's... history just is kind of coming into focus in a different way to me as I speak to you. The other interesting place of convergence is that Seabury, Samuel Seabury, is one of the namesakes of the seminary that I went to, and then the seminary that I went to for my doctoral studies as well. And so I had a chance over the years to learn a little bit more about him. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about him, but as you can imagine, the challenges and the tensions between the Church of England, which is the church from which the Episcopal Church sprang, and the relationship between those that sought to found this country and break off from England. So there were lots of historic challenges in those relationships. Seabury was seen to be very much so a loyalist, and if you've seen the play Hamilton or listened to the soundtrack, you've heard takes of how they characterize Seabury in that he was actually arrested at one point by patriots and held in prison for a number of weeks, I believe, for his loyalty to the crown. But he had some change of heart, and when he was elected and selected to become bishop here, he wasn't able to take the vow, the oath to the King of England, and so they turned to Scotland in order to have him consecrated as bishop. An interesting story in and of itself, but he was consecrated bishop, returned here, and had an interesting ministry. As a person of that time, it probably won't surprise you to know that he held slaves, and if you look at the history books, you can read some about the individuals by name that he and his family held, and the relationship between he and his wife and the slaves that were given to him by his father-in-law in this very transactional way. It's interesting things to look at, but when we think about the history of our church, our diocese, and its first convention in the same year that he was consecrated bishop, and the intertwining of all of this history into a present-day reality. When I think about the seminary that formed me and the doctoral studies that have really continued to help me, to equip me as a leader, I think about Seabury Western, that was the seminary, and then Bexley Seabury, which was the merger of two seminaries to become a new entity to support theological education in a creative way. The importance of honoring the the good things that come from our tradition and our practices as the church, but recognizing also the bad decisions, the mistakes, the sins of not only the church historically, but our present day challenges that we face as we seek to do justice and to love mercy and walk humbly with God. We don't do this in a perfect way, but we do this seeking to turn ourselves and all that we have over to God in ways that God can bring us healing and reconciliation. I had a chance recently to spend time with the director from the doctoral program that I was in, and just hearing about the work of the seminary and trying to really pray with them about how they're working to shape lay and clergy leaders and form them to do ministry in the church, not only of today but of tomorrow, as we look at the structures that we need to build in order to support the work of God today. St. Francis is a place that's doing that in an ever faithful way, and you heard in Sarah's sermon some of the ways that we got called out and lifted up as a parish and community center at convention. But I'm struck by the passage that was chosen by the powers that be in the church from Lesser Feasts and Fasts for Bishop Samuel Seabury's feast day. It's from Matthew's Gospel, chapter 9. Then Jesus went about all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the good news of the kingdom, and curing every disease and every sickness. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion for them because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Then Jesus said to his disciples, "The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore ask the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest." As we as a parish and community center are seeking ways of being formed as disciples of Christ and as leaders in the church and in the world, how are we being sent out as laborers in the vineyard? Who are we equipping? How are we ourselves being equipped by God to do this work and ministry as God's Spirit is poured upon us to do the work that we've been called to do justice, to love mercy, and walk humbly with God? It's important to recognize the historic realities of our church and the brokenness that exists within the church and in the world. And it's also important to recognize the power of God as God works through us, even in our fallenness, perhaps especially in our fallenness, to bring healing not only to us, not only to the church, but also to the whole world. Thanks for listening, and until next time, Christ's peace be with you.